Hey everyone, it's Strange Michael. I hope you're doing well today. I'm back into my September fall, one day away from October reviews. This is for the 1999 Tim Burton movie based on the original Washington Irving story called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. This one is just called Sleepy Hollow. Again, it came out in 1999, stars Johnny Depp and Christina Ricci, and I love this movie. I saw little bits and pieces throughout my life. Of course, I was born in '94. This movie came out when I was about 5 or 6. I don't think I saw any of it at that time, but I remember growing up watching things on like AMC, the Sci-Fi Channel, different channels like that I pretty much grew up on when I was, getting into my horror era because of my mom. And I remember having little bits of this movie shown to me throughout my life. I don't think I saw it in its entirety until about 10 years ago, and I absolutely loved it. One of the first people who ever brought me to watching this movie was from a channel that I used to love a lot, as a matter of fact. The Nostalgia Critic, Doug Walker, who I can't stand. I think most of the internet can't stand nowadays because of the different stories behind the scenes and because of just he and his brother Rob, and I don't know. I'm not trying to throw too much shade. I'm just not a fan of those guys. I grew out of them. The Nostalgia Critic is mainly just screaming and yelling at the camera all the time, whereas I just complain and whine to the camera all the time. It's very, very different. Anyway, Sleepy Hollow was a film that he had brought up there back in the day, probably about 8 years ago, somewhere in that ballpark, and he really made me want to go back and see it again, mainly because he brought to my attention, even though I didn't know a whole lot about this at the time, he brought it to my attention that this was a modern-day version, almost 30 years away from the original company. Hammer Horror Films used to make old horror movies like Dracula, The Mummy, Frankenstein monster movies, Wolfman movies, but really not called The Wolfman. It was like the werewolf of blah, 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 blah. They were a big name in horror. They were kind of taking over the mantle of Universal Monsters after they had kind of ended their franchises with House of Frankenstein, House of Dracula, the Abbott and Costello movies. The Hammer films, I've never been a massive fan of. I haven't seen any of the Christopher Lee films. I haven't seen really much of anything aside from the Mummy franchise. And those are 4 movies, and they're mostly fine. They vary a great degree on my interest and how bored and how bad some of them can be for me personally. But I never really put the correlation between this movie and those really together until Nostalgia Critic Doug Walker had brought that up in his review. And it's genius. I never realized that. I never realized what Tim Burton was doing in this movie, even though I liked it before I actually knew about the Nostalgia Critic or whoever. I can't talk tonight, forgive me, it's been a long day. It's been a long day and my brain is mush at this current point. But when is it not? Let's be honest. Sleepy Hollow is extremely fun. It's kind of riding the straight-up border for Tim Burton movies. It might be one of his best, by the way, up there with Nightmare Before Christmas for me, and Beetlejuice. That it's right on the line of being a straight-up horror movie with everything from the scares to the straight-up tons of gore, practical effects, a lot of CGI blood, but a lot of practical blood too. There's a lot of horror elements in this. It leans more into that, but it also has a horror comedy feel to it, and I really love it. If you've ever wondered about some of these Johnny Depp films like Sweeney Todd or Willy Wonka's remake from Tim Burton, if you like kind of that zany, weird performance stuff from Johnny Depp, this is one of those types of movies, but a little bit more reserved, surprisingly. A little bit more reserved as a Tim Burton film. A lot of the time, Tim Burton movies, for me, feel a little too self-indulgent. I can't stand the first Alice in Wonderland movie. I hate it with a deep, deep passion. I might have to review it for this channel at some point, I don't know, since that's kind of a horror movie, but kind of not. This movie very much maintains this feeling of a fantasy, and again, a Hammer Studios type of movie. And I love that about it. It really is a great tribute movie if you love that kind of thing. If you're not into that kind of thing, I still think this movie, being a 1999, right on the border of the new millennium movie, can really bring you in. It's just one of those, to me personally, a timeless fall, Halloween, October classic movie. Kind of like during the summertime, I love to watch the Brendan Fraser Mummy film. It's like my favorite of all the Mummy franchise movies. It's just, there's something perfect about it. And I really think Sleepy Hollow really hits that word for me. Perfect. I think there's nothing really you could do or change about this movie to really make it any better. Yeah, it has a little bit of dated CGI, but it's still most of the CGI, about 95% of it, looks great to this day. In 2022, how many movies can you say that about? I own it on Blu-ray. That should tell you everything you need to know because I don't really buy Blu-rays all that often unless it's something I really love, like Star Wars. But anyway, Sleepy Hollow stars Johnny Depp, like I said, and essentially he's a fellow right in the break of the world where people are starting to get into science, but a lot of people in cities and, mayoral candidates and whatever, they don't really accept it all that much. They don't really believe in cutting open cadavers to see what really caused somebody's death. If it was a natural cause, or if somebody was brutally murdered, or why this or that happened to somebody. Maybe they could cut open the bodies and find out. He's kind of the beginning of a CSI investigator, While he goes to court, he tries to prove why this should be allowed in the township that he's in, and they essentially, mainly Christopher Lee himself, who stars in this. There's a lot of cameos in here, by the way, by a lot of Hammer folk, who I love. I'll talk about that in the character section. But Christopher Lee has a small cameo at the beginning of being a judge in the town, or a mayor or something. I think it's just a judge. And he tells Johnny Depp, hey, go over to this town over here outside of New York, where they're currently set in the beginning of the movie. Go to this place out here, it's called Sleepy Hollow, and do your little experiments out there with the cadavers and try to solve this murder mystery where there's 3 different murders that have happened, people being decapitated. Find out about this, debunk this urban legend they're talking about there, about this Headless Horseman character, and then come back to us, depending on whatever you find out there. If you're able to solve that mystery, come back to our town in New York City, and we will let you do your little experiments to solve crimes. So it's got a little bit of a mystery, crime thriller thing going for it, but it's not really that. It's just a nice element added into this beautiful fantasy-esque movie. And it, again, mostly is Johnny Depp going to Sleepy Hollow, encountering people like Christina Ricci, and just really kind of getting into the town, really starting to investigate these beheadings. The beheadings are a very interesting thing, though, because the bodies are not having the heads just laying there beside them. A lot of the time at this point in history, this being a period piece, by the way, in case you don't know that, the bodies are not having their heads left behind with them. They're being taken. And usually that would be to not be able to identify the bodies, as they say in the film. And that's not what's happening here. But apparently this Headless Horseman character who is chopping people's heads off, which, by the way, is brutal. It's brutal. Between the practical effects, the CGI stuff, all of it blends so well together. Again, one of the best Tim Burton experiences I've ever watched in my life. I still think it's one of his top 3 movies ever. I will stand by that till the day I die. I don't know which one I like more, this or Beetlejuice. I think Nightmare Before Christmas is easily his best thing ever, but I digress. So Johnny Depp is out here, but one of the weird things about this Headless Horseman character decapitating people is that when he chops their heads off, somehow, before Johnny Depp encounters this thing, this entity, this monster of some sort, by the way, played by Christopher Walken. Yes, Christopher Walken plays the Headless Horseman here, and he's phenomenal. Just his body language and everything, he is amazing in this. I really love him here. That should tell you everything you need to know. He was not the casting I would have picked for this movie, but he did a great job. When people have their heads cut off in this movie by this Headless Horseman, for some reason the sword or axe or anything that's used for this, to kill these people, it cauterizes the wound, which makes Johnny Depp say, how the hell is that possible? And it's fascinating, the investigation stuff in here. And again, taking that with the practical effects that are used, specifically in one scene where a bug crawls out of the stump of a neck, it was horrifying. There's a lot of great stuff in here, but again, a lot of blood. It is a very, very action-packed, action-oriented, kind of like the Mummy Brendan Fraser movie, gory, crazy, insane, weird movie. And there's a lot of humor in here. I wouldn't even straight up call this a comedy. It's right on that line, like I said, but it has a lot of humor in here for the writing, for the characters. They just work so well, and it feels like Johnny Depp being a fish out of water story shouldn't work in this movie, and it totally does. He's in a new town, new setting, new mystery to solve. People in the town don't really know what to make of him, even though some think he's handsome, some think he's just, a weirdo. The main people who kind of run the town are fascinating to me. You've seen a lot of these guys before, one of them being Ian McDiarmid, aka Emperor Palpatine, who I love deeply. Phenomenal actor, very small role here, but seeing him here was nice. Classical actor, wonderful. Again, Christopher Lee himself, Count Dooku. These two worked side by side later on, many years later, for me in my childhood. 2 of my biggest influences of all time in my childhood of villain characters. Love both of those guys. You also have Michael Gough, or Michael Gough. I think it's Michael Gough. I love that man. If you don't know who he is, he played in a lot of old kind of Hammer type of things, but mainly, what I would say he's probably the most famous for, which is kind of sad, is playing Alfred in the old Batman movies. Mainly Batman and Robin, and Batman Returns, I believe, and Batman with Michael Keaton, and Batman Forever. Michael Gough was a wonderful special man. He recently passed away, I believe, and I loved him deeply. He was such a cool guy. He seemed like such a sweet man, and watching him here, around the time he did Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, and seeing his, even at this time with how old he was, seeing how he clearly did not have the best health at this point in his life, he's so good. He was willing to put on makeup and all of these things, and to have these classical, wonderful actors brought in by Tim Burton, cast in these small roles that are kind of pivotal to the movie, they all do a good job. Everybody does a good job here, even down to Christina Ricci's father character. I've seen him in some things before. He's even good here. Johnny Depp is so much fun in this movie. I love this man. I think his best performance ever is still Black Mass, where he played Whitey Bulger. He was phenomenal there. He's great in Public Enemies. He's great here. He's great in Transcendence. The dude is just talented, just plain and simple. Jack Sparrow might be his best performance, I don't know, but I love him as Whitey Bulger. He's phenomenal. If you haven't seen Black Mass, you need to see that. This may be a horror review channel, but I might review also crime thrillers at some point later on down the road, because to me, a lot of the time that can balance out with the kind of things I talk about. Anyway, I really love Johnny Depp in this movie. How could you not? He's amazing. He's just an amazing actor, extremely talented, and he and Tim Burton can typically pull off something really special no matter what it is. It's always unique, and people don't give him enough credit for that. Either of these guys credit for that. Christina Ricci's good, by the way, as the female lead kind of love interest for Johnny Depp's character. I really like her as well. It all blends so well, and that writing brings everybody to life, and I really love it. It has that humor aspect to it that really work. I like that even though Johnny Depp is probably the smartest man in the whole room, he's still getting shot in the face with blood constantly, and it's hilarious. His reactions, his reaction timing, his comedic timing, it's just perfect. It's perfect, even before the Jack Sparrow character became a thing for him a few years later. It's just such a great flick, and I cannot believe more people don't talk about this, aside from people who are big Tim Burton fans. And I'm not a big Tim Burton guy. I just love the things I saw in here. It's great for the most part. Moving on to the look of the movie. It is a beautiful movie. It's absolutely stunning. One of my favorite parts of this film was how much time they spend in the woods, just on horses, riding through the woods, trying to solve this Headless Horseman mystery. It's beautiful. The leaves falling, the flowers falling, and some of the scenes and flashbacks back to Johnny Depp's mother back in the day, Ichabod Crane's mother, if you will, back in the day. Watching just pink trees during the springtime with flowers falling down. It's beautiful, but it maintains in the main essence of this movie, the main portion of this movie, about just the foggy days of September and October. It feels like this time of the year, and if you love that kind of thing, this is for you. If you've ever been to a pumpkin patch for like a field trip when you were a kid and you remember all the fog and all the mist and everything, that's what this movie reminds you of. It's just, it's cold, but it's cozy. It's done in a way that not many people could pull off as directors, and I really think it's a great example of how great of a director Tim Burton is. How talented his eye for directing is, how talented his eye is for the images he wants to create. It's such a well-made movie, but it's such a creative movie too. That's a big plus for the script myself, included in my opinion on this. I just think it's extremely well done. I think it's such a blast to watch. It's so much fun. Again, the practical effects in here are phenomenal. A little bit much CGI. That just about 95% of it aged wonderfully. And some of it's just a little bad. a little bad. The music here is fantastic. It's done by Danny Elfman, who did Star Wars and Superman and all these big things you know. The music here is phenomenal. It's great. It really adds a lot of soul to the movie that's already very, very soulful. I love it. If you haven't seen Sleepy Hollow, the 1999 film or adaptation, whatever you want to consider this, of the Washington Irving story, which I've never read, by the way. I used to own the book when I got married. I tried to get rid of some things. That's one of the things I got rid of, and I kind of feel sad about that. But still, I never read the story. I hope it's good. Maybe I'll read it one day. Maybe I'll review it on my other channel, Mr. Wildboy94. I don't know. Maybe. When it comes to Sleepy Hollow, though, great flick. I really love it. I think it's a beautiful movie. Very, very fun. Very, very funny. It's just everything you could possibly want from a Tim Burton movie, and what we all miss, I think, from Tim Burton movies in general. It's a very well done thing, and I can't believe people don't talk about it enough. It's one of those things that at this time of the year, I try to give it a watch at least every other year. I don't always have the time to, but I'm really glad I got a chance to watch this before I delved into I just finished up the Hellraiser series. I'm really wanting to watch some things like this, and before and after I get into the Halloween movie reviews for that franchise. Because things like this a lot of the time get forgotten at this time of the year because of things like Hocus Pocus, because of things like Goosebumps, which I love deeply, because of things like Halloween and things like, you know, whatever thing you watch at this time of the year. A lot of the time Sleepy Hollow is one of those things most people either forgot about or they don't really care about, or they don't even know about it, which is sad. Anyway, Sleepy Hollow for me, if I had to rate this film on a 5-star basis, you can already tell I love it. I think it just gets better and better every time I watch it. It feels like a Hammer film, and I love that about it. I think the blood in this movie is bright, bright red, and it's just beautiful. With the black and white, the snow, all of the things that show up in this movie, it could not possibly be better. I really don't think it could be. Yeah, like I said, some of it hasn't aged the best, but for the most part, it's wonderful. It's really, really wonderful. If I had to rate it on a 5-star basis, it'd be a 5 out of 5 stars for me. I cannot imagine how anybody could watch this and not have a fun time with it. I really don't. Even for an hour and 45 minutes, the pacing is just quick. It's right on where it needs to be. It's fantastic. Anyway, what are your thoughts on Sleepy Hollow? Have you seen this movie? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Put all your thoughts and comments down below, folks. I would love to hear what you have to say about it. Do you love it? I really think it's very underrated and very forgotten in a very sad way. Anyway, thank you for watching, guys. God bless you all. We have like one more day until I can say Happy Halloween every single day that I upload. Anyway, thank you, guys. God bless you all. Goodbye.